Matthew Pianka. I am here with Claude Phipps, the solicitor Michael Pykosh, and the zoning administrator, Mr. Jeffrey Knight, and the City Law Bureau is represented by Mr. Neil Grover. There is a court reporter. The court reporter is here because the zoning hearing board is more formal than the planning commission. The court reporter is making a transcript in the event of an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. The zoning hearing board is like a court of law. The zoning hearing board's decision must be based on facts and law, not on the popularity or unpopularity of the project or what seems to the board to be a good or bad project. In other words, the applicant must meet a legal burden of proof and proves the elements of a variance or special exception. The law is the city's zoning code and the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. To the audience and everyone who resides or owns property close to the subject property and has something legally relevant to say will have an opportunity to speak. You must speak one at a time and you must not interrupt the testimony that's being transcribed by the court reporter. We have 3 cases we're going to continue. That's old business 2533, 2534, and 2545. I'm going to make a motion. These all have been requested for continuance by the applicant.
Yeah, Mr. Pianka, for each one of these, the attorneys representing the applicant for 2533 and 2534, it's the same attorney, requested those matters be continued to the April 17, 2023 meeting, 6 o'clock. And then the attorney representing the applicant at application number 2545 made a similar request for that matter to be continued to the April 17, 2023 hearing date.
I'm going to make the motion to continue. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Phipps. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Pykosh, do you want to note that there's only 2 of us at the moment and what that means for any applicant?
Yep. So for those who are going to be before the board this evening, which are 3 applications of new business, number 2548, 2549, and 2550. There are normally 3 members of the zoning hearing board. There's 2 today, and the board could operate with 2 members because it's a quorum. But we always like to let everyone know that if there should be a split vote, then it would be considered to be a denial of an application because you're not getting an affirmative vote. So that being the case, when we call each case to come to present their evidence in this matter, you could have the choice of moving forward with the 2 members, or if you would like, you could request a continuance and go to the next meeting. Hopefully we'll be the members.
On that note, I'm going to call the first case, which will be new business 2548, a variance and special exception application for 1644 North 3rd Street. And if the solicitor will read into the record the documents that are in the city's file.
Mr. Chairman, I have pre-marked as exhibits, Exhibit B1, which is the 5-page application in this matter. Exhibit B2 are photographs showing the exterior, interior, and the floor plan of the subject property, and that's 3 pages. Exhibit B3 is a 5-page business plan. Exhibit B4 is a petition signed by individuals like in favor of the project. Exhibit B5 is the notice to neighboring property owners. Exhibit B6 is a lease agreement. and a deed, which is provided for standing purposes. Exhibit B7 is the notice from the city of Harrisburg to the applicant of the time and date of the meeting this evening. And that notice was dated March 23, 2023. Exhibit B8 was the legal advertisements, which were placed in the Patriot News on March 12th, 2023 and March 19, 2023. Exhibit B9 is the Planning Bureau case report. Exhibit B10 is the Planning Bureau resolution. And Exhibit B11 is the hearing notice that was posted upon the property in question. So, Mr. Chairman, I have exhibits B1 through B11.
Okay, I'm going to swear in Jeff. Jeff, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, and just a quick note, there is an email from Mr. Hobbs that he plans to attend, but he's running behind from work. So,
Okay.
sorry. Please, if you could, Jeff, if you could briefly summarize the case, the issues, and what the city's position is on the case.
Sure. So the applicant is proposing to establish a retail store as an accessory use on site, which requires zoning hearing board approval of a variance application for section 7-305.7 of the zoning code, and a special exception approval for relief from the 3 required off-street parking spaces as outlined in section 7-327.6 of the zoning code. So the issue before the board tonight, the applicant would like to utilize space within the first floor of the property for a retail store business. I think it's kind of like a consignment shop slash, I think we'll be having retail sales and things of that nature, toys, knickknacks, things of that nature. And the associated off-street parking with a retail store use because the property is located in the RM district. As the applicant has noted in their application and their testimony at the planning commission meeting, the store was at the property was at one point a store in the past, I believe was part of a jewelry store. And at some point between now and then, it was converted to multiple apartments within the building. And the applicant is occupying one of those apartments. And she'd like to basically reestablish that commercial space in the first floor, the front portion of the first floor of the building. As you can kind of see from the existing conditions photos that were taken, the property is kind of similar to the one next door at 1646 North 3rd Street. It's likely that was all built at one time, multiple commercial uses in there, and they were just converted to residential at one point. So, this is not really introducing a new use into the neighborhood per se. It's kind of reestablishing a former commercial use on site. And, given the size of the space and the types of things that will be sold on site, it's likely that a lot of the clientele will come from around the surrounding community, will be walking there, potentially biking there. It's likely not going to generate a significant amount of traffic and parking demand on street. And one of the parking spaces, as outlined in the zoning code, is for the employee, which is the applicant, and because she lives there, that could be kind of co-located together. So overall, the Planning Bureau is supportive of the proposed use. The Planning Commission recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request with the following conditions. The retail store use will only occupy the 310 square feet of the front portion of the first floor, as indicated in the floor plan submitted by the applicant, and the use will not be permitted to expand beyond this footprint without receiving zoning approval. Any new signage advertising the business will submit a certificate of appropriateness application and receive approval from HARB, and will submit zoning relief requests and receive approval from the Zoning Hearing Board if not in conformance with the signage regulations. And that's because the property is located in this historic district. No sidewalk, no outdoor or sidewalk sales of merchandise shall be permitted without the submittal of a sidewalk use permit approval from the Planning Bureau. Finally, the applicant will coordinate with the city's Department of Public Works to ascertain whether additional refuse containers will be needed beyond those already provided for the existing residential units on site, and to update the billing account for the property if necessary. The planning commission recommends that the zoning hearing board approve the request for the following reasons. The size, scope, and location of the retail business will not pose a threat to the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents in the surrounding community, and will not adversely impact the essential character of the neighborhood. The proposed use, a limited boutique style retail store, is less intense than some principal and accessory uses permitted by right in the RM district. The applicant has submitted a petition of support with signatures from 19 surrounding residents supporting the proposal. And finally, the request for relief from the off-street parking requirements is warranted due to the limited size and scope of the proposed business, the availability of on-street parking, and the likelihood that local residents will comprise a significant percentage of the customer base and will be able to walk or bike to the subject property.
Thank you. You could please state your name, your address, and your business title if relevant, and then I will swear you in.
To read a tenant, 1644 North Third Street.
Okay, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please tell us about your store.
Um,
Go ahead. I'll let you.
Ms. Tennant, would you like to wait until Mr. Hobbs gets here, or would you like to just proceed with the two members?
right.
You're all right going forward? Okay. Yeah, if you could tell us what you're looking for then.
I'm trying to open up a boutique which would consist of women and kids clothes, variety of stuff, new and used, everyday shampoo, all kind of et cetera, stuff like that. I've been there for 10 years and a landlord gave me the idea. He's the same person that had it when it was a store in 73. And I mean, I consider it to be a walk-by store because most of my customers would be my neighbors.
And are you good with the conditions that have been set forth by the planning commission?
Yes, I am.
And, I believe there's retail in the area already, right across the street.
I know that there's the Harrisburg Improv Theater is right across the street, then Glow Harrisburg is right up the block. It's the property across the street's kind of currently under construction. I think there was intention to put commercial use there, but I don't know that there is one.
The former laundromat, I think.
Maybe, okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. I only have one question for you, because I only ask a lot of questions. I see one of the conditions that came out of planning for this is a boutique. This is a hypothetical question to you.
Okay.
If the boutique doesn't succeed, would you be looking to convert that to a convenience store type of environment?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, Ms. Tennant, the application that you submitted, you adopt all the verbiage as if you testified here today.
Yes.
And then the photographs were photographs, they fairly inaccurately reflect the building in question,
Yes.
and same with the floor plan.
Yes.
Okay, and same thing with your business plan. That's something that you put together and,
Yeah, I had help with neighbors.
okay,
They was looking out. They helped.
sounds good.
I
This is
recognize
nice.
some names on the list.
I don't have any other questions.
Jeff, anything else to add?
Nope, nothing from our end.
Neil, anything?
Nope.
I'm going to make a motion to approve with the conditions set forth in the planning commission's resolution for approval. Seconded by Mr. Phipps, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Dent.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna call. I do the conversion. Airbnb. think the conversion is gonna be. Oh, okay. Well, let's swear Mr. Hobbs in, and then I'll call the next one. You're up here. All right, with the Mr. Hobbs coming, I'm gonna make a motion to add him as a voting member tonight.
Second.
And all in favor? Aye. Welcome aboard. Yeah, I'm gonna call 2550. This is the variance application for 202 State Street. This is for the WCI. We did the jump back up. Okay, if the solicitor will please read into record the documents that are on the city's file.
Mr. Chairman, I've marked as Exhibit B1, the application filed in this matter. Exhibit B2 are the plans from Design Consultants Incorporated, which are 7 pages. Exhibit B3 is the deeds. Exhibit B4 is letter to the applicant dated March 23, 2023, advising the applicant of the time and place of this hearing. Exhibit B5, I've marked the legal notices that were published in the Patriot News on March 12th, 2023 and March 19th, 2023. Exhibit B6 is the Planning Bureau case report. Exhibit B7 is the Planning Bureau resolution. Exhibit B8 are the letters to neighboring property owners. And Exhibit B9 is the hearing notice posted upon the property in question. So I have exhibits B1 through B9.
Thank you. And just let it be known for the record that Jeff Knight is still sworn in from the previous case. Jeff.
Yes, so the application before the board here is that the applicant is requesting relief to convert the existing office building into a 4-unit multifamily dwelling. While the use is permitted by right in the commercial neighborhood zoning district in which the property is located, the project proposes more units on site than is permitted by right per section 7-307.3A of the zoning code, and thus requires zoning hearing board approval of variance application. With this project, similar to the last one, really what the applicants are doing is taking the property back to its original use as a residential building. I believe they purchased the building in 2006, and at that time converted it into commercial use. And so now they're kind of going back to residential use. There's a little bit of a conundrum in this one in that, the multifamily dwellings are permitted by right, but the size of the lot on which the building sits only permits 1 unit by right. So it's weird that the use is permitted by one section of the zoning code, but kind of not by another. So that kind of supports their variance justification. Additionally, and as the applicants note in their documentation, the property was at one time 4 separate units, and that's confirmed by the fact that there are 4 separate kitchens, or sorry, 3 separate kitchens, I believe, still in the building, and 4 full baths. And so I checked with the codes administrator who looked into the records, and she confirmed that there were definitely 4 units. It looks like there were probably an office unit on the first floor with 3 residential units on the floors above. So really, you're almost just converting the office use to a residential unit in total as part of this project. But due to the fact that it was operating as office at one point, and now they're going back to residential use, they have to file for the variance application based on the density regulations. The Planning Bureau is of course supportive of this. We've seen over the 10 years I've been here. The commercial real estate market, especially downtown, has been kind of waning while the demand for residential units downtown is increasing. So it's natural that these buildings would be converted back into residential units. It'll help, bring more residents downtown, activate the streets on nights and weekends as well. The Planning Commission recommends that the zoning hearing board approve the request with the following conditions. The applicant will receive approval of the associated land development plan application filed concurrently with the zoning relief application. And then if the applicant intends on making any exterior alterations to the property, they must be reviewed for conformance with the historic district design guidelines. And if necessary, we'll file a certificate of appropriateness application and receive approval from HARB. The Planning Commission recommends that the zoning hearing board approve the request for the following reasons. The proposed project will adaptively reuse an office building, ensuring the continued occupancy of a historically and architecturally significant building. The proposal will add new residents to the neighborhood to activate the street on nights and weekends and continue growing a customer base to support local businesses. And finally, given that the property has retained its internal configuration as distinct units, and the project will be returning the property to its previous use, the proposal meets the criteria for the granting of a variance application.
Thank you. If the applicants could please state your names, address, and business titles, and then I'll swear you in. Into the microphone, please.
I'm Catherine Sterner from By Design Consultants. My home address is 620 Belvedere Street, Carlisle.
Lori Fortini, Vice President of WCI Partners, 1900 North Second Street.
All right, thank you. And if you could both please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Tell us about the conversion of the building.
Jeffrey covered it really well. So it's currently being used as offices, or it was, I don't know if it's currently. But it had been apartments, and there are full kitchens and full baths on each floor. So we're trying to go back to an apartment use, but minimize our renovations in doing that, to keep things the way they were before as far as the count. Yeah.
Was there any off-street parking with this? I didn't.
I don't believe there's any provided, but the property's in the CN district. It's not required to provide that.
Okay. I'll start with Mr. Hobbs.
Right, so really the only, I guess is, so it's 3 units only, it's only permitted to have 3 units, right? But it was being used for units already at some point.
Well, it's actually only permitted based on the lot area to have 1 unit on site. But as noted, the building has retained its internal configuration, the divisions between the former units on site. So they're just basically reestablishing those units and converting them from office spaces to apartments. So the variance relief is for 3 additional units that would otherwise be permitted by right in the zoning code.
Right here.
I'm guessing you didn't build the house.
No.
Good evening. Really have no questions. You're basically stored it back to what it was, and this is a purple district. So the outside of the building, they're going to keep it the way it is.
The only question I would have, just to bring out in your variance narrative number 2, you indicate that converting the building into less than 4 units would not be possible without a complete gut and reconfiguration of the building. So essentially, is what you're saying is economically you wouldn't be able to reconfigure the building in less than 4 units. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you could go back to 1 unit, but we still have the full bath, full kitchen on every floor, so it would be strange to try to go back to the single unit, which is the item that we're looking for. It wouldn't be feasible, probably.
I'm looking at the second floor plan. And I see it. Apartment studio on it. Your plan, that studio won't fit you.
It'll have a studio sized kitchen, but with a full bath. Yes, yes.
Right. Previous stuff you said. Oh, okay.
Nothing else additional now?
Anybody from the audience? I'm going to make a motion to approve with the conditions set forth in the planning commission's resolution for approval. Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Hobbs. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, we'll call 2549, special exception application for 1223 North Second Street. The solicitor will please read into the record the documents that are in the city's file.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have pre-marked exhibits B1, which is a 6-page application. Exhibit B2 are photographs of the subject property and floor plans, which consist of 5 pages. Exhibit B3 is a 21-page business plan. Exhibit B4 is a deed for purposes of standing. Exhibit B5 is a notification letter to the applicant from the city. Exhibit B6 is the notice to neighboring property owners. Exhibit B7 is the legal advertisement which ran in the Patriot News on March 12th, 2023 and March 19, 2023. Exhibit B8 is the Planning Bureau case report. Exhibit B9 is the Planning Commission resolution. And Exhibit B10 is the hearing notice, which was posted upon the property in question. So I have exhibits B1 through B10 in this.
Thank you. As noted before, Jeff Knight is still sworn in from the first case. Jeff, if you could please summarize.
Yes, so this application is a bit unusual because it's the first short-term rental that will have come before the zoning hearing board and the planning commission. The applicant is proposing to establish a short-term rental on site to request relief from the requirement for an off-street parking space. The proposed use is considered a use not specifically prohibited by the zoning code. And I believe that's section 7-303.11 B, and thus requires zoning hearing board approval of a special exception application. So as noted, this is the first one to come through the formal review process since the adoption of the current zoning code in July of 2014. The issue is really, I mean, there were short-term rentals back then, but the issue has really picked up steam in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And during that time, the Planning Bureau's perspective, again, has been that this is a use not specifically prohibited by the zoning code, but our communications with people that are interested in setting these up are almost entirely for investment property purposes, buying a property, creating multiple Airbnbs or Verbos, whatever platform you're using. And our communication to them has largely been to discourage that if they're going to be investment properties, and that's largely for 2 reasons. One, it removes a home from the inventory, from the city's housing inventory. As most people know, not just in Harrisburg, but elsewhere, housing affordability is an increasingly urgent issue. The gap between what people can afford and what things cost is, pretty much growing every year. And so the retention of, every viable housing unit in the city is important to help mitigate that, and to, if not drop the rental price, the purchase price, at least slow the rise of that. And so when people are buying these for investment purposes, that's one less roof that can go over the head of a family or a household here in the city. And 2, a lot of these tend to be owned by entities or people outside of the city. And so when they, if they're not well managed, they tend to create problems for their neighbors, and the neighbors cannot get in touch with the owners of these properties. And so they end up coming to the city, and it's even difficult for us to get in touch with the owners a lot of times. And so you end up having these adverse impacts that are very difficult to mitigate if the owner is not willing to take proactive steps to address those. So you really have those 2 issues of reducing the housing inventory and having these adverse impacts, whether it's noise, trash, parking, whatever that's created by having this turnover of the use of these properties. When I expressed that to the applicant, he said, I'm moving into this property, I'm going to be living here, so that pretty much addresses the two primary concerns of the Planning Bureau. But at the end of the day, I always tell people it's really up to the zoning hearing board. First person through is going to be kind of setting the precedent. Is in terms of how the board reviews these, in terms of maybe what the public is coming out to speak for or against the project. But given that the applicant is going to be living on site, they'll kind of be dealing with whatever adverse impacts if there are. And again, it's still being retained as a owner occupancy or an owner occupied unit. So the Planning Bureau is generally supportive of the project because for those reasons. The applicant will be creating a unit on the third floor. So there is already an internal staircase to that floor, but they'll also be installing a fire escape in the rear yard to have a second means of egress. And that's actually going to be the primary means by which I believe guests will be coming into this unit. So they'll be going through a small grocer's alley behind the properties in this block, going through the fence, through a gate in the fence, and then going up the stairs to this unit. It's relatively small. I think I don't even know that there's a kitchenette or anything up there. So, we're not having to worry too much about this treading into the waters of creating a second unit on site because they won't have that kitchenette. But yeah, on the whole, I think this is the type of short-term rental use that we kind of envisioned whenever these things started to come up more, and the applicant is at least has expressed agreement with the conditions when discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. So we're happy to support this as presented. With that being said, the Planning Commission recommends that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request with the following conditions. The applicant will receive approval from HARB for the proposed stairwell in the rear, as this aspect is integral to the establishment of the proposed use, and he has received that approval from HARB at the March 6th, I believe, meeting. The applicant will not create a physical division between the principal unit and the short-term rental unit to ensure the property can be readily converted back into single-family use should the applicant or a future owner wish to do so. And so, we really wanted to put that in there so that this didn't become a permanent feature. If the applicant decided to move out and the use was no longer owner occupied, and maybe this is something to consider as a condition, that it could be converted back to a single-family unit. Operation of the proposed short-term rental unit will only occur if the property is owner occupied. The property cannot be purchased as an investment property with the principal use being as a short-term rental. Guest stays will be limited to 5 days or a length of time determined by the Zoning Hearing Board to be sufficient to allow reasonable operation of the use and to ensure that the property does not function as a multifamily dwelling or as an extended stay hotel. And another reason for that number was we wanted to kind of keep it under 7 days because that's largely what defines like a rooming house here in the city is they tend to be week-long leases. And so we wanted to make sure that, we already have like owner occupancy requirements, ADA accessibility for rooming houses. And I don't believe the board has probably seen a formal rooming house application come through the process since the adoption of the zoning code either. But we wanted to make sure we're creating some pretty clear lines between these types of uses because they all do tend to share some aspects. So that's why we have that limit to 5 days. And then finally, if granted approval, the applicant must file a mercantile permit application for the proposed use and provide proof of insurance to operate the business within their residence. The Planning Commission recommends that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request for the following reasons. The property is currently owner occupied and the proposed short-term rental will be operated by the owner. As such, in comparison to other unpermitted uses in investment properties, the current proposal does not remove a unit for city residents from the city's housing inventory. In contrast to other unpermitted short-term rentals established throughout the city in recent years, the operator is an owner occupant and thus will be accessible to surrounding residents if the proposed use creates adverse impacts. And finally, the current proposal, if approved by the Zoning Hearing Board and the conditions applied to it, will help guide other such proposals seeking to legally establish short-term rental units.
Thank you. If the applicant could please state your full name, your address, business title if necessary.
Grant Illage at 1223 North 2nd Street.
And if you could please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Tell us about your,
Yeah,
tell us. about
Jeff, again, summarized well. There was one thing that I wanted to add. So you have either on your screens or in your hands, the mailings that were sent out to adjacent properties, proof of that mailing. I have representatives of 5 distinct units that's on that list that have expressed support for the project. I don't have like written proof of that, but I wanted to share that there has been neighborhood support, including the 2 immediate units on each side of my property. There are no immediate adjoining, sorry, losing my voice a little bit, no immediate adjoining properties attached in the rear. So those would be the only units that could potentially be physically attached to our property and to the unit in question.
Good evening, sir.
Evening.
I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
You don't go full back the evidence.
Sure. Sure.
I try to keep it light. Short stay, when we say short stay, you're limited to 5 days. Give a hypothetical.
Yeah.
I come in 5 days and well, I get my business done in Harrisburg.
Sure.
And I want to stay another 5. How will you enforce it?
Yeah, so we'll be able to review the applicants who are coming through. We also plan on doing some measure of this in a more informal capacity where there'll be people who will be staying there that we'll have a personal connection with as well. But we would, for the exact reasons that were laid out here, if someone were to reapply for like consecutive stays that were longer than the threshold that we're going to be able to put on automatically, that we would just be able to deny that request.
You'll be those to the board review. And my fear is low default version of
Sure. Yeah, we don't either, to be frank. That's not at all our objective. And yeah, if there is some sort of requirement that you would like to place for record keeping, I would be open to that. We can definitely produce those records over whatever period of time if necessary.
Because again, sort of the state is for how will it be enforced and how will it be so with the compliance.
Sure. Mhm.
Second piece, the hotel price.
Yeah.
Versus hotel stay. Stay in a hotel for 5 days. What's your price?
That's going to be a little bit of kind of playing it out, getting a sense of what the value is of the unit. I don't expect it to be dramatically different from an overnight hotel stay. I do know that people like being kind of right in the middle of Midtown. We are, if you look at the address, we're right off of the intersection of 2nd and Verbic, which is where a lot of the activity is in Midtown. So we're hopeful that people will just want to kind of be right close to the center of the action there, and that will make the unit attractive to potential guests. Yeah. Mhm.
And the location is excellent for the action is at.
Mhm.
Why do you look to be ask for?
Yeah. Yeah, the primary motivation is actually, I alluded to it earlier, the ability to allow people to that we have a personal connection with to stay there as well. So we're a family that hosts people a lot, and we are excited about the possibility of having that as overflow hospitality space if the need arises. It is. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Thanks.
My turn. Good evening, Mr. Elledge.
Evening.
Question, so this is, I believe, on the 3rd level of your property is the unit,
Right.
right? So is this actually, I guess, separated, right, part of the house that has like a secured entry, or is it just open?
Yeah, so we are in the process of putting a door at the bottom of the stairwell from the 2nd to the 3rd floor.
Okay.
And that'll be consistent with the character of the 2nd floor of the house.
Okay,
A solid wood door. It's already hung. It just doesn't have a doorknob on it yet. That's where I am in the process. So yeah, so that will be the restricted access from the 2nd floor side. On the outside, we have a keyed lock installed. We haven't gotten the stairwell in place yet. the expense of the fire escape is going to be significant enough that I wanted to make sure that we had approval before we went through that. But there is a roof deck on the third floor that the fire escape will come onto, and then you'll be able to enter through the existing door there on the third floor into the back of the unit. And Jeff mentioned it's a smaller footprint than the 2 floors below. It's one essentially master bedroom with a bathroom and a walk-in closet. That's the extent of the interior of the unit. Wanted to mention that as well.
All righty, thank you.
Yeah.
And so one more questions, I guess this is more towards you, Mr. Knight. So with this being considered, I guess, a short-term rental unit, if it's approved, are there any, I'll ask this. I guess, are there any guidelines to what, I guess, requirements of that type of unit, since it's not, like you said, mentioned in the code or anything like that, in terms of what we look at usually for a dwelling, a living unit?
Are you talking about from like a building codes perspective, like?
Yeah, I guess is the best way to probably categorize it.
Yeah, I would say we probably don't have, I can't speak to like building code or fire code regulations. I'm not knowledgeable enough about them, but I know that the fire chief is like aware of these types of things, and they always prefer to have like 2 means of egress or sprinklering or something, so that it's not just, okay, it's on the 3rd floor and you've got to walk down through my internal stairwell. And if there's a fire, somewhere on the stairwell, how do I get out, kind of thing. So I think it's almost treated maybe like an accessory dwelling unit or something, whereby it's almost a secondary unit, is just used kind of differently. So my guess is the same types of building code and fire code regulations would apply.
Okay, so that would be determined then, I guess, by the codes office in the end, what they would enforce for that type of unit.
Yeah, and and Neil can probably speak to this a little bit. The administration's currently in the midst of developing an approach to short-term rentals. I believe there'll actually be a city council hearing on Wednesday about that to take some feedback. And I think from that, we'll probably formalize some regulations for this between the Building Codes Bureau, Fire Bureau, Tax Enforcement Office. How is the money collected for something like this, as a result of that process.
Okay. That may create a third question for me, but my second question was going to be, I know you mentioned, right, that even with the current thought, right, on short-term rentals, is that it's not purely an investment property. So in this instance, right, Mr. Ellis is living in the property. Now, what if it becomes an instance, right, where somebody is using the property and say they were living in it and they moved out, now they're using the main part as more of a traditional rental? Would it still be considered out of bounds?
I think from our perspective, yes. I think we're pretty, again, without a larger regulatory structure behind it, you're kind of, operating in a little bit of a gray area right here. And so we're trying to put as, restrictive as guide rails as we can. And in terms of something like this. And so if you were to move out and rent out the downstairs as its own separate unit and the 3rd floor, we would consider that to no longer be in conformance with at least the conditions recommended by the Planning Bureau and adopted by the Planning Commission. At the end of the day, it's up to the zoning hearing board to determine whether they want to maintain that as a condition. And if they did, and we were apprised of the applicant moving out of the property, we would, we would hope he would notify a future property owner. If not, and it came across our desk, if we got complaints from the neighbors or otherwise was apprised of that, we would let the new owner know that they were not permitted to operate that. And we would give them the zoning hearing board decision of this case as like demonstration.
Okay. All right. And then my last question then is, so you mentioned, right, it seems like that's something that the city is already current discussion about.
Mhm.
Do you think it makes sense for this type of decision to delay, right, until there is that formal rule set around it, if it's going to be like sometime in the near future?
I would say no, only because we did a listening session back in August of 2017 to basically do the same thing. And, here we are back again. So I don't think there's any guarantee, A, that something comes out of it, and B, to know how long that would take.
Okay, got you. Those are all my questions.
Thanks.
aside from family and friends, how many people will be allowed to stay in the guest
Yeah, so
house?
we're planning on putting a single king bed in there. So that's gonna be, I mean, that's gonna take up the majority of the bedroom space up there. If there was to be a specific restriction, we would be open to receiving that. Probably we would like allow someone to bring, say, a pack and play, or we would put a single air mattress up there for families with one child, something along those lines, because the space can handle that. That's mostly from a vantage point of how much physical space is there in the unit.
And then there's one bathroom.
There is, yeah.
You're not changing the outside of the building except for adding a fire escape.
Correct.
Your owner occupied.
Yes,
Your kitchen's on the first floor.
correct.
How's this not a bed and breakfast?
What's that?
How's this not a bed and breakfast?
Well, because I mean, the bed and breakfast is a little different in that they're not serving food. I think as part of the bed and breakfast, you're like normally serving, it's usually more than one.
Don't have
unit.
to.
It's more than usually more than one unit. But I mean, in reality, it is. I mean, that's what Airbnb is, right? It's
Yeah, they're a bed and
it's-
breakfast.
Yeah, it's a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Through an online platform.
Right.
And that's, I think, the real challenge with the short-term rental industry is it really is a lot of these other things, whether it's, and Neil has brought this up, you can do rental commercial space, renting somebody's yard or something like that. It's really kind of touching in a lot of different places. And so you've kind of got to draw, I think, the line somewhere. And I think, for us, it's like a business, a bed and breakfast is designed to be a commercial property. In fact, the owners of one of the only 2 bed and breakfasts that we had in the city here recently, I think in 2020, successfully applied for a zoning code amendment to change it from owner occupied to basically manager occupied. So that even like further moves it towards the commercial aspect of that type of business. As opposed to like being, I mean, I guess you could call it that. I don't know anybody that would run a one unit bed and breakfast.
Well, that's what Airbnb is, though.
Right.
It's a 1-unit bed and breakfast.
Right.
I'm struggling to see why it's a accessory dwelling unit, why this specific one. And that's why I'm struggling with other ones that are operating outside of the bounds of coming. I appreciate you coming here.
Yeah.
To start this conversation. I do. And that's why I'm struggling with. Is it an accessory dwelling unit?
Can I speak to the bed and breakfast aspect?
Sure.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yes. The answer is yes, absolutely. You
Okay,
can,
great.
yes.
Yeah, so we kind of have, if we talk about the 2 potential use cases, the
Right.
one is people staying who we don't have a personal connection with. Those would be paying guests.
Right.
Who would never come down into our unit. Right?
Right.
That's like the nature of what we're intending on doing with the unit. The other category is people who we have a personal connection with who wouldn't be paying us to stay with us, which of course you're allowed to have people over to your home
Absolutely.
and have them down for breakfast or whatever. So from the actual bed and breakfast component of that definition, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that we're not intending on using it as a commercial space down on the first 2 floors at all.
Oh, which I completely understand, but the
Sure.
city doesn't have another mechanism to handle anything unless you're gonna put you in as a rental unit. But you're not. So to me, you're a bed and breakfast.
But
You should be licensed as a bed and breakfast. It's how I'm reading everything until we have something that says this is what you fall under. And we don't. So I'm struggling here.
I would say this board has no authority to write the code.
Right. And I
Board
agree.
behind
We don't.
what is Zoning. Jeff has probably thought about this more than anyone in the city about how to deal
And
with
probably
this disruptive.
Banged his
sort
head
of-
against a wall over it too.
We do have a provision says the code shall be interpreted literally by the zoning hearing officer. And if we interpret it literally, it ain't there. That's the problem. I will be frank, our office has had a very strong disagreement with other offices because either everyone regulates it or no one regulates it. Either fire, codes, planning, everybody does it, or no one does it because it's not been addressed in any code. Short-term rentals have not been the discussion inside the zoning amendment, inside the building code, inside fire. Now, I do believe building and fire still have a say in something like this because you have to have an ingress and an egress for some place that someone is staying. So it's not that it's not contemplated, it's not regulated in the same sense as a zoning issue. It's not licensed in anything except perhaps a business license. And the business license is your enforcement. You can't be in business to sell hot dogs on the street without a business license. So if you're going to rent out some part of your property, there's obviously a business license that comes with it. The question, does the landlord license come? Does a residential inspection license come? Those are the tough questions. I think the numbers we got recently, 320 units are reported in the city right now. The vast majority are not owner occupied. We are literally looking into the questions that the implication of passing a code does to, if it puts anyone out of business, is that an issue in terms of a taking by the government? If it, or do we massage it in some other way that strikes a middle ground? I will tell you, I've got a mandate from the mayor's office and I've got a mandate from the council president that as this year continues, they want a short-term rental ordinance on the books. And the question is, where does it go? Does it go into the zoning code? Does it start in the building code? Does it start in the fire code? Does it go to all of them? And that's the debate that I think is going to commence tomorrow night in public. I would suggest that I don't know that this is an application that can be decided. I mean, get down to that simple question. I don't think you can redefine a Airbnb. I don't think you can redefine a bed and breakfast. I understand what planning is trying to do. I think it's an important discussion to have in the public because it shows all of the things you're up against. This is the other version of, like Uber was for regulators. They came in and despite taxi licenses, suddenly you got this other thing out there that seems to be ignoring all the rules that were already in place. And I give the gentleman credit for coming forward, doing his application and trying to get this into the public discussion. I think there is, again, fire and codes, I think, have a say. I think you have to have a safe operation, which is what fire and codes are about. Zoning's a little more about quality of life than safety. But I don't think you can operate anything without covering safety bases in this municipality or any other in Pennsylvania. So I think they have the right to be there and look at it. I think what's unclear is what licensing is for this kind of operation.
I just think as a zoning, it looks like you're operating a bed and breakfast to me, that even if you didn't serve them breakfast, that's just. As this code is written to me.
And the difference there is because those are sprinkled by law as opposed to an owner occupied, just, automatic, although the original version was required to invest. They greatly objected to Airbnb short-term rentals because they had already made their investment to sprinkle those facilities, which was not insignificant for them. So.
We've seen Airbnbs around town that have been just gut jobs that probably should have been sprinkled.
I can certainly think that doesn't, more than and to a default moving site. Okay,
Right.
That's what I provided when I said for the Airbnb point, basically you're advertising the over. Okay. And then you're advertising said we do not provide. Okay, that's number one. And the second one was is that it's owner occupied. If you sell it and the new owner comes in, they can't run along with the exception. Can they run along with the exceptions?
I think of course they can. And I think this happens all the time in the city that once a thing is in place, getting it undone isn't virtually impossible, but it's close to virtually impossible because there's not an inspection team knocking on everyone's door saying, hey, what are you doing in your house? Are you renting the upstairs to somebody?
Basically put verbiage here to basically very clear, because again, the big something like there is owner occupied. Okay. When it ceases to be owner occupied, then something's got to be changed. If you need to come back to the planning again, because you're treating the whole building either as a rental property, or when you put a new owner, you go occupy the same position that you have. But there's got to be some verbiage that makes that very clear. Because this is a slippery slope.
Absolutely.
And I guess it's like there's no legislation from city council yet. Okay, just no form it. Then we're almost acting as the fire, as the, what you did in planning, I saw your write up, that was addressed, okay, with the fire requirements and stuff are. So it's just gonna be a stopgap measure that says, hey, wait a minute, we don't want this to work in this spot. And until legislation catches up, it seems as though we said we may not have the power to do that, but we can't make it up on terms.
If I think it would have to be an agreed stipulation of the party and the city, and if the board's council thought that was, appropriate. That, and I don't know if the term would be, I'm not sure the term is if it becomes owner occupied or doesn't become owner occupied. I think the term is upon the enactment and effective date of a short-term rental ordinance or ordinances in the city. This application will come back before the board, not divesting the owner of any particular rights they have. I think, I think it depends how fast it happens, frankly. But we're making stuff up as we go along. I'm just telling you, we just are, and I prefer the government not make it up in zoning boards or any other judicial body.
What about Mr. Knight's suggestion that if there's a change in ownership and it's not owner occupied, then the property has to reconvert to a single family residence? I mean, you still have the issue.
Was that not isn't that a condition already? No.
I mean, it doesn't
With
say it
checking.
has to be converted because theoretically, and as I'm writing this, I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody else buys it. And they're like, I'm gonna live there and I want an Airbnb. Like, then they could still, then it would be a continuance of that approval grant.
Right, but if it's not owner occupied.
Right.
It would have to be
Right.
it would have to be converted back to a single family. Wow.
And
Well, I
you
think
and
the
you think
approval
that
of
would
the
go to the next owner?
What's that?
You
Airbnb
think that
should
would
drop
inure
when
to the
he
next
sells it.
owner?
I'm sorry.
You think that would inure to the next owner? It's not a deed issue. It's nothing else. I mean, how is that going to go to the person who buys it? As a matter of law, as a matter of enforceability,
Right.
how does that go to the person that buys it? I'm from New Jersey. I buy a place in downtown Harrisburg, big town. I know that if it wasn't a deed, that'd be great.
Right.
It's
so
not in the deed. Right.
I like the idea that if it came, ownership, it reverts back to the.
Or there's zoning approval. Disappears. Yes, it doesn't exist. When he sells the building, it doesn't exist.
As long as he owns the building, this is accepted.
Well, again, that
Yeah.
brings into the potential that he moves and still owns the building, but is like renting out the downstairs and then has an Airbnb on top. Yeah. And so again, that's why, to me, it's easier to have that owner occupancy. And again, that's a condition we have in specific criteria for various uses, throughout the city here. So, we're not like, it's not like we're making something up to do that. We're taking a kind of bit of another specific criteria, regulating another use and applying it to this, because again, there is nothing, written down about this kind of thing, about this kind of
So
use.
that condition is put on the table. Okay, it's going to be up to you to set it. I just see the slippery stuff. I've seen, single family dwellings, the partial eventually. The bottom sit next to it, and they're strictly blocked. Something that. Stop. There's no legislation that only.
Well, it's really a budgetary question. It's changing the enforcement provisions. There's actually lots of legislation that could put a stop to it. It's just very difficult to enforce.
I know where we live, we stopped, we had whole places that off. And they were. We didn't wait on the city, went back to our comments. And I put a stop on it, and they very explicitly. Everything for markets.
Bellevue Parks were unique in that regard, in that you guys have covenants on.
Anyone from the audience?
Can I make one last remark?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm getting that that the vote is going to be on such that if I were no longer the occupant, that it would no longer be an Airbnb. That's what I'm understanding. If that's the case, like I'm definitely agreeable to that condition. And I'll just add, you're talking about the enforceability of the question, and I like, as much as my word is, and as much as I am under oath here. That would be my intent, to ensure that the continuation wouldn't occur if someone else were to be living in the first 2 floors, whether as a tenant, which honestly, I can't ever envision that happening, because we would most likely sell and move before renting the first 2 floors. So whether as a tenant or as a new owner, it would be my full intent to make sure that it's clearly understood whatever conditions need to be applied here.
Thank you for that. I think, just wanted to say, I think that part of it is for us is, even as Mr. Knight kind of stated, there is no rule, right?
Yeah.
So what we now what we do here kind of sets the precedence. And so
Yeah.
this will come back to us more, as long as there isn't some other
Right.
specific rules in place for it. So. Right. So right.
Actually, I prefer that you add to your motion to approve on a non-precedential basis. Because if we're going to end up with regulations this year, I wouldn't want to say that everyone else who happens to be doing it off the books right now is suddenly entitled to a different condition those regulations create.
We're going to take a recess. Okay, I'll bring us back in the session. Anybody have anything else to add? Yeah. Microphone.
So I make a motion to accept the recommendation from property.
Is there, we'll just ask, is there a second to Mr. Cook's motion? Hearing none, motion would fail. Is there another motion somebody would like to make?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to deny.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. So it was a denial 2-1, and then you'll receive an actual written decision within 45 days of today's meeting. Thank you.
Seeing no other business on the agenda, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn at 7:22 PM. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hobbs. All in favor?
Aye.